The old oak tree standing proud at the boundary of Jake Mitchell's farm had witnessed over 100 years of sunrises, storms, and stories. Its roots clung deep into the very soil his family had toiled on for generations. As a child, Jake often nestled beneath its vast shade, listening to his grandfather spin tales of grit and perseverance, of floods and fires, of neighbors who helped each other, and others who overreached. But nothing in those stories prepared Jake for the force of nature currently striding up his gravel driveway. Not wind, nor weather, but a woman named Karren. She didn't bring rain or drought. Her power came wrapped in polished shoes, legal jargon, and an aura of smug authority. Today, she arrived not with a handshake but with a clipboard and an agenda. Jake sipped his coffee slowly from his porch, watching the drama unfold like a storm on the horizon. Karren Whitmore, self-declared queen of the Crestwood Estates HOA, was making her move. The prior warnings, letters, and passive-aggressive complaints had all led to this confrontation. "Mr. Mitchell," she called, climbing the porch steps with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "I'd like to have a word about your property." Jake lowered his mug and exhaled. "Funny. I wasn't planning to have a word about mine." Her smile faltered for a heartbeat before she pushed on. "Your farm may sit outside our HOA boundaries, but it borders Crestwood Estates, and we have certain expectations about how neighboring properties should appear." "Let me guess," Jake replied, eyes narrowing. "It's the barn. Or the rooster. Or maybe that my land doesn't look like your neighborhood magazine cover." Karren blinked, then continued with feigned politeness. "The red barn is a bit jarring. A neutral tone would blend better. The animal noises, especially at dawn, are a disturbance. And frankly," she waved a hand toward the fields, the grazing cattle, the towering silos, "this whole scene isn't very harmonious." Jake chuckled, not kindly. "This farm's been here for over 100 years. Your HOA? Barely 5. If anyone's out of place, ma'am, it's not me." Karren's posture stiffened. "Change is never easy. But harmony requires cooperation. I'd hate for this to escalate." Jake tilted his head. "That a threat?" "Of course not," she said sweetly, voice dripping with false civility. "Just a suggestion. Before we involve county authorities." At that moment, Jake saw her clearly, not as a neighbor, but a storm cloaked in lipstick and entitlement. The kind who mistook kindness for weakness and saw rural life as something to control. "Let me be real clear," he said, stepping closer. "This farm doesn't fall under your little kingdom. You don't get to tell me what color to paint my barn, which animals to raise, or how to work my land. Don't like roosters crowing at dawn? That's not my problem." Karren's nostrils flared slightly. "We'll see about that." And with that, she spun on her heel, stilettos crunching the gravel as she stalked back to her luxury SUV. Jake shook his head. He'd weathered more storms than he could count, but something told him Karren might be the fiercest he'd ever face. 2 days later, it began in earnest. A letter, stiff with legalese and HOA branding, arrived in his mailbox like a coiled snake. It cited community standards and visual harmony as reasons his barn and animals were now a concern. Jake read it once, smirked, crumpled it, and lobbed it into the kitchen trash. "Nice try, Karren." But this was only the beginning. The next morning, a white county truck rolled up his driveway. 2 men climbed out, clipboard ready, scanning the area like they expected to find toxic waste instead of hay bales and cows. Jake, hammer in hand from mending a fence, approached them with a raised eyebrow. "Morning, fellas. Something I can help with?" One of them, Roger, who Jake knew from zoning meetings, rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, Jake. We've had a flood of complaints. Zoning violations. Animal welfare. Health hazards." Roger glanced around, clearly unimpressed by the complaints. "Far as I can tell, it's just a well-run farm." Jake folded his arms. "Let me guess. Crestwood Estates?" Roger nodded sheepishly. "Yeah. Most of them signed by the same name, Karren Whitmore." Jake let out a dry chuckle. She thinks she can force me off my own land. Roger shrugged. I don't like it either. But we've got to follow protocol. We'll be in and out. And true to his word they were. The pens were clean, the animals healthy, and the zoning laws unchanged in half a century. Karren had nothing, but that didn't slow her down. The next complaint came swiftly. This time, noise. Jake was feeding the goats when his phone rang. Sheriff Tom Caldwell's voice came through, half apologetic. Jake, got a noise complaint. Says your rooster's disturbing the peace. Jake laughed. At dawn? You guessed it. Says it's too early. Jake looked out across the land where the morning sun lit up the Duquesne grass. That's nature, Tom. It don't run on HOA rules. The sun was barely peeking over the golden fields when Jake's phone rang. Sheriff Tom Caldwell's voice greeted him with a familiar chuckle. Got another one for you, Jake. Let me guess, Jake said, already rolling his eyes. The rooster. Bingo. Apparently it's waking people up too early. In a rural community. Imagine that. Jake smirked. You ever heard of a rooster that sleeps in? Nope. Well then, no problem here. Tom chuckled. Didn't think so. Just giving you a heads up. If she keeps pulling this nonsense, she and I are going to have a little chat. But Karren wasn't the type to be swayed by logic or decency. She thrived on control, and Jake was the one piece of the puzzle she couldn't manipulate. So, naturally, she escalated. A few days later, as Jake was hauling a fresh bale of hay to the barn, he noticed two men in suits standing at the edge of his property. They were holding blueprints and eyeing the land like surveyors preparing for battle. Wiping his hands on his jeans, Jake walked over, irritation already building in his chest. Morning, he said curtly. Something I should know about. The older of the two, a wiry man with thick glasses and a too-tight tie, cleared his throat. Mr. Mitchell, we're from the County Property Division. We received an inquiry regarding the boundary lines of your land. Jake's jaw tightened. And who sent that inquiry? The man hesitated. The Crestwood Estates Homeowners Association. Jake exhaled slowly. Of course it was. And what exactly are they claiming? That your property line might be inaccurate. That part of your land might fall within their jurisdiction. Jake actually laughed. You're kidding, right? This land's been in my family for generations. The lines haven't moved an inch since long before Crestwood was even a blueprint. The second man, clearly younger and visibly nervous, cleared his throat. We'll be reviewing original surveys just to confirm. Shouldn't be a big deal. Jake stepped closer, lowering his voice. And if those surveys don't match? The older man adjusted his tie. Then there could be a case for reassessment. That did it. Karren wasn't just annoying anymore, she was dangerous. She wasn't trying to find him now. She was trying to take his land. Jake forced a tight smile. Go ahead and check. I've got my original deed, and if anyone from your little HOA steps 1 inch onto my land again, I'll file trespassing charges so fast your SUV tires will still be warm when the deputies show up. The two men nodded stiffly and made a quiet exit. That evening, Jake pulled out his old filing cabinet and began digging. Every deed. Every survey. Every zoning permit. He made copies and left them in a folder by the front door, ready for the next round. If Karren wanted to get dirty, Jake was ready to get legal. The next morning, Jake paid a visit to the county records office. He placed his folder on the counter in front of the clerk, a sharp-eyed woman named Marcy. I need certified copies of everything on file from Mitchell Farm, he said. Deeds. Survey maps. Agricultural zoning permits. All of it. Marcy gave him a knowing look. Let me guess, that HOA mess? Jake raised an eyebrow. Word travels fast. Marcy smirked. You're not the first. A couple years ago they tried to annex a nursery because they didn't like the look of some overgrown trees. The county shut it down before they even finished filing. She handed him the papers. Here you go. If they try anything, you've got more than enough proof to shut them down. Jake tipped his hat. Appreciate it, Marcy. Later that day, while reinforcing the fence along the boundary line, Jake spotted movement. Karren. She stood just outside the property line, flanked by 2 HOA board members. They whispered and pointed toward his land like they were plotting a siege. Jake strolled over slowly, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Afternoon, he said casually. Something I can help you with? Karren flashed a too-sweet smile. Just reviewing the boundary situation, Mr. Mitchell. You mean the boundary you have zero legal claim over? The one confirmed by county records? Jake folded his arms. Karren's eye twitched ever so slightly, but she remained composed. Some of our residents are concerned about the unsightly appearance of the farm. We're proposing a privacy fence for harmony. Jake glanced at the two behind her, one in a pricey polo shirt pretending to look anywhere but at him, the other a stiff woman radiating passive aggression. So, Jake said, you want to build a fence to hide my farm? On my land? Karren nodded with a brittle smile. For the good of the community. Jake laughed softly. Tell you what, put a fence on your side, I won't stop you. But the second someone sets foot on my land to do it, I'll have the sheriff here before your clipboard cools. Karren's smile vanished. There's no need to be hostile. Jake leaned against a post. No hostility. Just a man standing his ground. Karren's voice dropped. This isn't over. Didn't think it was. The next morning, the roar of a chainsaw jolted Jake from sleep. He threw on his boots and bolted outside, and what he saw turned his blood cold. A crew. On his property. Chainsaws buzzing through a section of fencing. Karren stood nearby, arms folded, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Jake stormed toward her. What the hell do you think you're doing? Karren turned slowly, feigning innocence. Just making improvements. This fence will help ensure peace between our communities. Jake's jaw locked tight. This wasn't just overreach, it was war. Jake's fists clenched. That fence is on my land. Karren tilted her head ever so slightly. That's debatable. Jake exhaled slowly, his tone low and dangerous. Do these men have a permit? What of the workers? A big guy who clearly didn't sign up for this kind of drama hesitated. The HOA told us they had all the paperwork. Jake smirked, eyes never leaving Karren's. Yeah, well, they don't. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and started dialing, still staring straight at her. Karren's composed mask flickered. What are you doing? Calling the sheriff. A tense silence settled over the field. The workers exchanged nervous glances. Karren stepped forward with forced calm. There's no need to involve the authorities. Jake arched an eyebrow. Then I suggest you tell your crew to pack up. Because if they cut one more inch into my land, they're trespassing. And I will press charges. Karren glared at him, jaw tight. But she knew she had lost for now. With a sharp, furious wave, she snapped. Stop. We're done here. The work crews shut down their chainsaws, packed up, and drove off in silence. Jake stood firm, arms crossed, watching the retreat. This isn't over. Karren hissed before storming off once more. Jake shook his head. She was right, it wasn't over. But neither was he. He knew people like her. They didn't retreat. They regrouped. She tried everything, legal threats, underhanded tactics, even trespassing. None of it had worked. Now she was getting desperate. The very next morning, as Jake was hauling hay, he spotted a new sign by the roadside near the edge of his property. He froze. It was a real estate sign. Bold, obnoxious lettering. For sale. And below it, under negotiation, coming soon, Crestwood Estates expansion. Jake stared at it. Then he laughed. A slow, disbelieving laugh that turned into a full, throaty burst of, "You've got to be kidding me!" joy. Still chuckling, he snapped a photo with his phone, then walked over, yanked the sign out of the ground, and carried it back to his porch like a prize buck. Before he could even call the county office, the click of sharp heels echoed up his driveway. Of course, it was Karren. "Oh, Mr. Mitchell," she sang with mock surprise. "I see you found the sign. There's been a little mix-up. I'm sure we can sort it out quickly." Jake leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed. "A mix-up?" She nodded, sugar-sweet. "We've been in discussions about acquiring nearby properties. It seems a few overzealous realtors assumed your farm was part of that." Jake raised a brow. "So a real estate agency accidentally listed my land for sale?" Karren's smile trembled. There was some enthusiasm about the potential. Jake's voice dropped. "Let me be clear. You do not own my land. You don't get to speak for it. And if I see another sign like this, I won't be tearing it down. I'll be suing your entire HOA for fraud." Karren's nostrils flared. "Mr. Mitchell, let's not overreact." Jake raised his phone. "Want to explain to the county how you tried to fake sell someone else's property?" Karren's face hardened. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stalked away, muttering under her breath. Jake hoped that was the end of it. It wasn't. Soon after, strange cars started appearing near his road. At first, he figured it was just nosy neighbors. Then came the drone, buzzing above his barn one evening like a mechanical vulture. Oh, hell no. He called the sheriff immediately. "Tom," he said flatly. "You busy?" "Depends." "This about her?" "Yep." Jake explained everything, every complaint, every stunt, and now surveillance. The sheriff gave a long whistle. "She hired a private investigator?" "Looks that way." "Well then," Tom replied, "it's time we had a very real legal chat with Miss Whitmore." The next evening, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up to Karren's house. Jake didn't know exactly what was said, but he knew Karren. She could dish it out, but she hated being held accountable. And sure enough, the next morning, her car was gone. The street? Silent for the first time in weeks. By the end of the week, the cherry on top arrived. Linda Matthews, a former HOA board member with a spine and a sense of humor, showed up at Jake's door with a freshly baked apple pie and a grin. "You're going to love this," she said. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Oh no. You're going to enjoy every second." She handed him the pie. "Karren? She's out. Board called an emergency meeting. Voted her off. Unanimous." Jake let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be." "Oh, it gets better," Linda said with a wink. "Word is she's selling her house." Jake took a bite of pie and smiled slowly. "Poetic justice." "Even better," she added. "She's moving to another HOA across town." Jake nearly choked on his bite. She's about to get a taste of her own rules. A week later, her house hit the market. 2 weeks after that, she was gone. Peace returned to Crestwood Estates. Jake didn't throw a party. He didn't gloat. Instead, he got a new sign made. He planted it proudly at the edge of his land. It read, "Mitchell Farms. HOA free since 1923. Within days, it became a local landmark. And every morning, as Jake sat on his porch sipping coffee, the rooster crowing behind him, he'd glance at that sign with a quiet smile. Karren may have started the war. But Jake? He finished it.